Hi Guy, tonight we journey to ancient Japan, specifically to a monastery garden raked with more care than you probably give your own hair. It's cherry blossom season, and the air is thick with the kind of beauty that makes even the toughest samurai weep or sneeze, depending on their allergies, which, probably didn't exist back then. The scent of incense hangs heavy, mixing with the metallic tang of, wait for it, cooling cast iron. You probably won't survive this story. I'm just kidding. Unless? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment with your location and local time. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine the scene, petals drifting down like pink snow, the gentle rustle of silk robes brushing against freshly raked gravel paths. Monks chant in the distance, their voices a low, soothing drone. The setting sun paints the sky in hues of orange and purple, filtering through the delicate branches of the cherry trees. It's all very zen, very Instagrammable, very deceptive. You trudge through this picturesque scene. It's more Pinterest than perilous, so far, toward the sound of clanging. A rhythmic clang, clang, clang that resonates through the tranquility. It's a sound that speaks of creation, of fire and force, of something heavier than the fluttering blossoms. Historical fact, duels were, super regulated back then. It wasn't just a random street brawl with katanas. There were rules, rituals, referees, probably even a designated snack break. Imagine, tiny rice cakes and steak served mid-duel. Excuse me, good sir, while I disembowel you, would you care for a refreshment? Quirky tidbit. Some samurai believed cherry blossoms carried the souls of fallen warriors. Okay then, so each falling petal is a tiny, pink, airborne ghost? Makes you think twice about having a picnic under a cherry tree, doesn't it? Imagine getting bonked on the head by a rogue spirit petal. Ouch! Who threw that? Oh, it's just Kenji, again. Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether single combat actually decided the outcome of battles, or if it was just for show, like a samurai talent contest. And for his final act, Masamune will attempt to bisect 3 watermelons with a single stroke. Judges, are you ready? The implications are fascinating. Were these legendary warriors just posers? Were they more concerned with looking good than actually winning? Food for thought. The clanging intensifies. The metallic scent sharpens. You round a bend in the path, the blossoms momentarily obscuring your vision like a fragrant pink curtain. And then you see him. He's a mountain of a man, squatting by a small clay furnace, the glow of the embers reflecting in his sweat-slicked skin. He's stripped to the waist, revealing biceps bigger than your head, which, let's be honest, isn't saying much, and he's got that 1,000-yard stare of a man who's seen too many hot metal mishaps. He's not just a bell maker. He's a sculptor of sound, a wrestler of fire, a blacksmith with exceptionally good posture. He's using a large ladle to carefully pour molten metal into a mold, the orange liquid hissing and spitting as it hits the damp clay. Steam rises, carrying with it the sharp tang of iron and something else. Something almost floral? It's unsettling, this mix of delicate beauty and raw industrial power. He doesn't notice you. He's too focused on his craft, on coaxing music from the earth's fiery heart. His movements are precise, practiced, almost hypnotic. You find yourself drawn in, mesmerized by the dance of fire and metal. It's a primal scene, a testament to human ingenuity, and surprisingly relaxing. You almost forget where you are, why you're here. Another clanging sound cuts through the garden's peace. This one is different. Closer. Sharper. It's the sound of steel on steel. The unmistakable ring of a drawn katana. The bell maker tenses, his 1,000-yard stare snapping into sharp focus. He doesn't look surprised. Not exactly. More. Resigned. Like he was expecting this. Like, it's just another Tuesday. He sets down his ladle, the molten metal still glowing in its bowl. Slowly, deliberately, he rises to his feet, his shadow stretching long and distorted across the meticulously raked gravel. The cherry blossoms continue to fall, swirling around him like pink confetti. It's a strangely beautiful, almost poetic prelude to whatever's about to happen. Someone wants a new bell, or maybe they're just here to fight about the price of the last one. Either way, The tranquility of the monastery garden is about to be shattered. The air crackles with anticipation. The scent of incense and cherry blossoms mingles with the metallic tang of impending violence. This is going to get interesting. From beneath a shower of falling cherry blossoms, honestly, it's like a pink snowstorm in here, emerges another figure. This one's less beefcake, more graceful menace. He moves with a fluid precision, each step measured, controlled, like a predator stalking its prey. The cherry blossoms swirl around him, caught in the invisible currents of his passage, turning the scene into something out of a dream, or maybe a nightmare, depending on which side of the katana you happen to be standing. His armor, a deep, lacquered black, gleams faintly beneath the pink blizzard, reflecting the blossoms like scattered jewels. The only sound, aside from the soft rustle of the petals, is the gentle clinking of small metal ornaments hanging from his belt. Trophies, perhaps? Or maybe just really fancy keychains. Historical fact: samurai swords, or katanas, were forged using a complex folding process. This wasn't just some slapdash blacksmithing. We're talking meticulous hammering and folding of the steel, sometimes thousands of times, to remove impurities and create a blade of exceptional strength and sharpness. Think of it like the ancient Japanese version of laminated dough. But instead of croissants, you get a sword that can slice through silk hanging in midair. This process, combined with differential hardening techniques, creating a harder cutting edge and a more flexible spine, resulted in a weapon that was both deadly and a work of art. Fringe tidbit: some samurai carried poems written by their enemies into battle, like a diss track playlist for extra motivation. Imagine that. You're about to charge into a chaotic melee, adrenaline pumping, and you pull out a little scroll, not with inspirational quotes or family mottos, but with some scathing verse penned by the very guy you're about to try to decapitate. Talk about psychological warfare. It was a way of showing utter disdain, of turning insult into fuel for the fire of battle. Oh, you think my haiku about my questionable fashion choices is cutting? Well, let's see how you like this cutting remark. Scholarly debate. Historians still debate the relative importance of swordsmanship versus mounted archery in samurai warfare. Was it more about elegant slicing or horseback sniping? The popular image of the samurai is often dominated by the katana, that iconic symbol of warrior grace and deadly skill. But the battlefield reality was probably a lot less choreographed sword fighting and a lot more chaotic maneuvering on horseback, peppering the enemy with arrows before closing in for the kill. Some scholars argue that archery was the primary martial skill of the samurai for centuries, with swordsmanship taking a more prominent role later on. Others maintain that the sword, as the symbol of the samurai class, always held a central place in their warrior culture, even if its practical application on the battlefield was sometimes overshadowed by the bow and arrow. The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in the middle, a complex interplay of tactics and weaponry that varied depending on the specific period and circumstances of the conflict. This new samurai stops before the bellmaker, his hand resting, not so casually, on his katana. The cherry blossoms continue to fall around them, creating an almost surreal backdrop to the impending confrontation. The bellmaker, still surrounded by his tools and half-finished bells, looks utterly unfazed by the presence of the armed warrior, almost as if he's expecting a delivery from the local tofu shop rather than a challenge to the death. The samurai's grip tightens on his sword hilt, the knuckles of his hand whitening beneath his dark glove. The air crackles with unspoken tension, the silence broken only by the whisper of falling petals. Okay, so maybe this is going to be a street brawl with katanas, after all. I challenge you, he says, his voice surprisingly soft for a guy about to potentially disembowel someone. It's a low, controlled tone, almost a murmur, but there's a steely edge to it that belies the quiet delivery. It's the voice of someone who is accustomed to being obeyed, someone who carries the weight of tradition and honor on his shoulders. For dishonoring my family name. The words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning, a testament to some ancient grievance, some perceived slight that has festered and grown into this moment of confrontation. The bellmaker sighs, a long, drawn-out exhale that seems to deflate the tension slightly. Like a punctured balloon, he looks up at the samurai, his expression a mixture of weariness and mild annoyance. Like this happens every Tuesday. He brushes a stray cherry blossom off his shoulder, then picks up a small hammer and taps it lightly against a partially completed bell, the sound ringing clear and pure in the sudden stillness. Dude, I'm just trying to make bells here. Can this wait until after my tea break? He gestures vaguely towards a small, steaming teapot nestled amongst his tools. There's a hint of genuine pleading in his voice, the plea of a craftsman interrupted in his work, a man who values the tranquility of his craft above the demands of honor and vengeance. No, apparently, it cannot. The samurai's eyes narrow, his hand tightening further on his katana. The soft murmur of his voice hardens, taking on a sharper edge. The dishonor you have inflicted upon my family cannot wait. It demands immediate redress. Prepare yourself. He draws his katana a few inches from its scabbard, the polished steel gleaming in the filtered sunlight that penetrates the swirling blossoms. The whisper of steel on wood is sharp and final, the sound of a challenge irrevocably issued. The bell-maker, with another sigh, sets down his hammer and looks at the samurai with a resigned expression. It seems his tea break will have to wait. Katanas clash. Sparks fly. Petals whirl. It's a mesmerizing, chaotic ballet of death and extreme flower power. The air crackles with the energy of honed steel meeting steel, a sharp, ringing clang echoing through the otherwise peaceful cherry orchard. Sunlight glints off polished surfaces, momentarily blinding as the blades flash in a dizzying blur. Cherry blossoms, shaken loose by the force of the duel, dance and swirl around the combatants, adding an almost surreal beauty to the brutal display. It's hard to reconcile the delicate pink snowstorm of petals with the deadly intent radiating from the two figures locked in combat. A stray thought crosses your mind. Someone really needs to paint this scene. It'd be a masterpiece, a deadly, potentially maiming masterpiece. You remember something you once read about samurai armor. Lacquered leather and metal plates, expertly crafted to protect the wearer from harm. Like a medieval Iron Man suit, but way more stylish. You wonder if these particular suits have held up to the rigors of recent activities. The bellmaker, a whirlwind of motion despite his age, parries a lightning-fast strike. His katana sings as it deflects the blow, the sound oddly musical amidst the grunts and shouts of the duel. His opponent, younger and seemingly more agile, presses the attack, his blade a silver streak aimed at the bellmaker's exposed flank. The bellmaker spins away, narrowly avoiding the attack, his own katana whistling through the air as he counters. You catch a glimpse of something unexpected, a glint of polished wood and silk. The bellmaker is using a fan. Not just to cool himself down in the heat of battle, although that might be a bonus, but as an actual weapon. He deflects a blow with a sharp flick of the fan, using it to parry the incoming katana with surprising effectiveness. You recall another historical tidbit? Samurai sometimes used fans in combat, not just to look fabulous, as you'd initially assumed, but to parry blows or signal commands, like a warrior semaphore, but with added flair. You have to admit, it's impressively stylish. You duck behind a particularly fluffy cherry tree, because, while you appreciate the aesthetics of this duel, you'd rather not become a human pincushion. The sweet scent of cherry blossoms fills your nostrils, a stark contrast to the metallic tang of blood now hanging heavy in the air. From your relatively safe vantage point, you observe the duel with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The bellmaker and his challenger trade blows, their movements impossibly fast. It's like watching two extremely angry hummingbirds fight over a particularly tasty flower. The clang of steel on steel is almost constant, punctuated by the occasional sharp cry as a blow lands. The cherry blossoms continue their macabre dance, swirling around the duelists like confetti at a particularly violent birthday party. Then, something unexpected happens. The bellmaker, seemingly tiring, stumbles. His opponent, sensing an opening, lunges forward, katana raised for a killing blow. It looks like it's all over for the old man. You brace yourself for the inevitable, sickening thud of steel-piercing flesh. But it doesn't come. Instead, the bellmaker, with a speed that belies his age, drops his katana and throws his hands up in a gesture of surrender. The challenger pulls up short, his katana hovering inches from the bellmaker's throat. He looks confused, almost disoriented. The fight seems to have gone out of him as quickly as it began. The bellmaker speaks, his voice low and calm, but you can't hear the words over the rustling of the cherry blossoms in the wind. The challenger hesitates for a moment, then sheathes his katana with a sharp click. He bows stiffly to the bellmaker, who returns the gesture, albeit with a slight tremor in his hand. The tension in the air dissipates, replaced by a strange, almost awkward silence. You peer cautiously from behind the cherry tree, trying to make sense of what you just witnessed. Did the bellmaker just yield? Was that even a thing in samurai duels? You remember reading somewhere that historians argue whether samurai duels were always to the death, or if there were rules about yielding. Like a samurai tap-out, you mused. Apparently, it might have actually happened. The challenger turns and walks away, his back ramrod straight, disappearing into the swirling cloud of cherry blossoms. The bellmaker stands for a moment, seemingly catching his breath, then picks up his discarded katana and sheathes it with a weary sigh. He looks up, directly at your hiding place. You freeze, heart pounding in your chest. He's seen you. He knows you've been watching. He starts walking towards you, his face unreadable. You're not sure what to expect. An apology for disturbing the peace? A challenge to finish the duel his opponent forfeited? Or maybe he just wants to thank you for being his audience. You swallow hard, preparing yourself for whatever comes next. The bellmaker stops in front of the cherry tree, his gaze piercing through the branches. He opens his mouth to speak, and you brace yourself for absolutely anything. The air, thick with the scent of cherry blossoms, pulsed with an almost unnatural energy. What had begun as a picturesque shower of petals, a gentle drift of pink against the vibrant green of the surrounding trees, now swirled into a furious, blinding blizzard. Pink snowdrifts piled up against the weathered stone lanterns, the delicate blossoms clinging to the rough surface like tiny, determined climbers. The sky, once a clear canvas for the delicate display, now roiled with a pink-tinged tempest, the wind whipping the petals into a frenzy. Japan's famed cherry blossom season, fleeting as it is, typically offered a gentle spectacle, a brief, beautiful interlude between winter's chill and summer's heat. This, however, was something else entirely. This was a riot of nature, a breathtaking, overwhelming explosion of pink. The air grew thicker, the swirling petals obscuring everything beyond arm's reach. It was as if the world had been transformed into a fragrant, rosy snow globe. The very ground seemed to breathe pink, each gust of wind sending up swirling clouds of petals, mimicking miniature tornadoes. It was beautiful, yes, but also intensely disorienting. Somewhere in the heart of this floral maelstrom, two figures struggled to maintain their footing. The duelists, caught in nature's sudden outburst, flailed blindly amidst the swirling pink. Their polished katanas, moments before glinting menacingly in the soft spring light, now clanged uselessly against tree trunks, the metallic echoes swallowed by the roar of the wind. It was said that some samurai, in the pursuit of mental discipline and combat prowess, practiced a unique form of meditation. They would visualize a storm of cherry blossoms falling upon their enemies, a soft, beautiful, yet utterly disorienting attack, a mental ninja attack of sorts. Whether this was a widely practiced technique or merely a fringe element of samurai training remained a topic of scholarly debate. Historians continued to pore over ancient texts, searching for clues to the true significance of the cherry blossom in samurai society. Was it simply an aesthetic appreciation for the ephemeral beauty of the flower? Or did it hold a deeper, more symbolic meaning, tied to the concepts of life, death, and the transient nature of existence? The challenger, taller and less grounded, stumbled, his vision completely obscured by the thick flurry of petals. He swung his katana wildly, more in an attempt to clear the air around him than to connect with his opponent. The bellmaker, however, being shorter and closer to the earth, fared slightly better. He crouched low, using the swirling blossoms as a strange, fragrant form of cover. "Dude, not cool," he shouted over the wind, his voice muffled by the swirling petals. "Nature's telling us to chill." He sheathed his katana with a decisive click, the sound surprisingly sharp in the midst of the natural chaos. The challenger, still blinking petals out of his eyes, lowered his sword, a disgruntled growl rumbling in his chest. He spat out a mouthful of petals, his face a mask of annoyance. "Fine," he conceded, his voice laced with resentment. "But we're not done." The bellmaker sighed inwardly. "Oh, goody. More angry hummingbirds later, then," he thought, resigned to the inevitable continuation of their duel. The cherry blossom blizzard, as quickly as it had begun, began to subside. The wind died down, and the swirling petals settled gently to the ground, forming a thick pink carpet that muffled the sounds of the forest. The air, still heavy with the scent of blossoms, gradually cleared, revealing the two duelists standing amidst the aftermath of nature's interruption. The challenger, his face still flushed with anger, glared at the bellmaker, The intensity of his gaze, however, was somewhat diminished by the stray petals clinging to his hair and clothing. He looked less like a fearsome warrior and more like a disgruntled child who had just been told he couldn't have dessert. The bell maker, on the other hand, seemed almost amused by the situation. He brushed a few petals off his shoulder, a small smile playing on his lips. The interruption, while unexpected, had given him a moment to breathe, to reassess the situation. He knew the duel wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now, at least, there was a temporary truce, brokered by nature itself. He looked around at the scene, at the pink blanketed ground, the blossom-laden branches, the air thick with the sweet, ephemeral scent of cherry blossoms. Even in the midst of a potentially deadly duel, there was beauty to be found. And perhaps, he thought, a lesson to be learned. The cherry blossom season was short, a fleeting reminder of the transient nature of life, of beauty, of anger, of everything. Perhaps this duel, too, would eventually fade, like the blossoms themselves, leaving behind only the memory of a pink-tinged storm. The bellmaker turns back to his furnace, his earlier calmness seemingly restored. The way of the warrior, he says, is not just about fighting. It's about knowing when not to fight. Historical fact: samurai followed a strict code of conduct called bushido, emphasizing loyalty, honor, and martial skill. Quirky tidbit: some samurai wore lucky charms into battle, ranging from religious amulets to bits of their mother's hair. Scholarly debate: historians still examine the extent to which bushido was actually practiced versus idealized in samurai society. Was it a reality or just good PR? It's also about making really awesome bells, he adds with a wink. Okay, so maybe he's not entirely zen. And, like respecting nature's totally obvious hints that maybe we shouldn't be trying to kill each other during a flower apocalypse. Fair point. You agree with the bellmaker's wisdom, despite the whole flower apocalypse bit, which does make you wonder if he also moonlights as a nature poet. He pokes at the coals with a long iron rod, sending a shower of sparks dancing into the dimness of the workshop. The air is thick with the scent of charcoal and something metallic, something ancient. Outside, the wind rustles the overgrown foliage, the whispering of 1,000 petals a constant background hum. It's unsettling, this beauty that threatens to consume everything. You can understand the urge to fight, to claw back some semblance of control in a world gone mad with blooms. See, Bushido, he continues, his voice taking on a lecturing tone, wasn't just about being a badass with a sword. It was about discipline, self-control, respect for your opponent, even in the face of death. He pauses, seemingly lost in thought. Of course, he adds with a grin, looking like a badass with a sword was definitely a bonus. He scoops a ladle full of molten metal from the furnace, the fiery liquid glowing like liquid sunshine. The heat radiates outwards, a wave of warmth washing over you. It's mesmerizing, the way the metal flows, almost alive. He pours it into a mold with a practiced hand, the liquid settling with a hiss and a sizzle. Now, those lucky charms, he says, his voice returning to its more conversational tone. You wouldn't believe some of the stuff those samurai carried around. Prayer beads, sure. Little statues of their favorite deities, make sense. But bits of their mother's hair? That's a whole other level of attachment, right? He chuckles. Imagine going into battle clutching a lock of your mom's hair. Talk about pressure to perform. He gestures towards a shelf lined with intricately decorated bells, each one a unique work of art. Me? I rely on the purity of my craft, the perfect balance of copper and tin, the precise temperature of the furnace, the rhythm of the hammer against the metal. That's my lucky charm. He pauses, his expression thoughtful. Though, he admits, scratching his chin, I do sometimes hum my grandma's lullaby while I work. Does that count? The silence stretches, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the rustling of the flowers outside. The contrast between the peaceful activity within the workshop and the encroaching chaos outside is stark. It's a small pocket of sanity in a world that seems determined to lose its mind. The thing is, he says, his voice dropping to a whisper, Bushido was complicated. Was it a genuine code of honor, deeply ingrained in the samurai psyche? Or was it a carefully constructed narrative, a way to justify their position in society? A bit of PR spin, you know, he shrugs. Historians are still arguing about it, and probably will be for a long time to come. He picks up a small hammer, its head worn smooth with use. He taps it gently against a cooling bell, the sound ringing clear and true. It's a beautiful sound. a sound that seems to resonate with the very air itself. The point is, he continues, even if Bushido was mostly propaganda, it still speaks to something fundamental in the human spirit. The desire for order, for meaning, for something to believe in, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Even during a flower apocalypse. He glances at you, a mischievous glint in his eye. Speaking of which, have you ever noticed how the petals of the moon blossoms shimmer in the moonlight? It's like they're dusted with fairy dust. Truly magical. You stare at him, speechless. The flower apocalypse is literally threatening to engulf the entire world, and he's waxing poetic about the shimmer of moon blossoms. This guy, he seems to sense your bewilderment. What? He asks innocently. Just because the world is ending doesn't mean we can't appreciate the small things. The beauty, the poetry. He sighs dramatically. Alas, the tragic irony of a world consumed by beauty. It's enough to make a grown man weep or write a haiku. He clears his throat and recites with a flourish. Petals fall like rain. World drowns in fragrant beauty. Where's my say cup? He grins, clearly pleased with himself. You can't help but smile. He's eccentric, that's for sure, maybe even a little crazy. But there's a wisdom in his words, a strange sort of peace in his acceptance of the bizarre reality they're living in. Maybe, you think, that's the real way of the warrior. Not fighting the inevitable, but finding beauty in the chaos. And maybe, just maybe, having a good laugh about it along the way. The duel's over. Dust motes dance in the fading sunlight that filters through the high windows of the dojo, illuminating the scene. He stands, back to me, the challenger, his movements deliberate and precise. The sharp tang of blood, metallic and faintly sweet, still hangs in the air, a stark reminder of the clash that just ended, the clang of steel on steel echoing faintly in the sudden stillness. He's cleaning his katana, not just wiping it down, but meticulously caring for it. A slow, almost hypnotic ritual. He unfolds a square of soft oiled cloth from a small pouch at his hip, the kind of rich, dark silk that seems to absorb the light. With careful strokes, he draws the cloth along the length of the blade, from hilt to tip, again and again, wiping away the remnants of the duel. The sweat, the dust, and, yes, the blood. I watch, fascinated. He doesn't miss a spot. He inspects the edge of the blade, holding it up to the light, turning it slowly, his eyes searching for any nicks or imperfections. It makes me think of those nature documentaries where a lioness meticulously grooms her cub, except this isn't a cuddly cub. This is a razor-sharp instrument of death. I remember something I read about samurai and their swords. Maintaining a katana wasn't just a chore. It was practically a religious experience. A multi-step process with specialized tools, oils, and cloths. They even had names for each part of the sword, from the kasaki to the habaki. It was more than just keeping it sharp. It was about honoring the weapon, respecting its power. Some samurai even named their swords, I recall, treating them almost as companions, extensions of themselves. Thinking about that makes me wonder, what did historians make of all this sword obsession? I can practically imagine the scholarly debates raging in dusty university libraries. Was the katana just a weapon, a tool of the trade, or did it represent something more profound in samurai culture? A symbol of their status, their honor, their very soul. Something to ponder, definitely. He finishes with the blade and moves on to the hilt, carefully cleaning the intricate carvings with a small brush. The care he takes reminds me of someone polishing their favorite sports car. Except, this car can also decapitate someone. He sheathes the katana with a soft snick, the sound strangely satisfying in the quiet dojo. He turns to me, a faint smile playing on his lips. A warrior's tools, he says, his voice low and steady, reflect his spirit. Okay, deep. I glance down at my own tools. My laptop, sitting on the bench beside me, its keyboard littered with crumbs and who knows what else. I suddenly feel a pang of shame. I can't remember the last time I even wiped it down, let alone gave it a proper cleaning. I start thinking maybe I should take a cue from this guy. Like, how much spiritual gunk has accumulated on the spacebar alone? I imagine tiny digital ghosts of unfinished articles and unanswered emails clinging to the keys, whispering reproaches. He catches me staring at my keyboard and his smile widens. Don't worry, he says. Not all of us are destined for the way of the warrior. Some of us are meant to wrangle words. He claps me on the shoulder and walks away, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my disgustingly dirty keyboard. I sigh. He has a point. Maybe I should at least invest in some compressed air. And maybe, just maybe, I'll start treating my spacebar with a little more respect. It's the least I can do for the countless words it has helped me bring to life. And who knows, maybe a cleaner keyboard will lead to a cleaner spirit, or at least fewer typos. The air hung still and heavy with the scent of damp earth and cherry blossoms. The storm of petals had subsided, leaving the monastery garden blanketed in a soft pink snowdrift that dusted the meticulously raked gravel. I walked slowly, the crunch of my footsteps the only sound breaking the pervasive quiet. The monks, I assumed, had retreated indoors, leaving the garden deserted. It felt strangely intimate, like being allowed a glimpse behind a curtain usually drawn tight. Zen gardens, I remembered reading somewhere, were designed to promote contemplation and mindfulness. Every element, from the placement of the stones to the sweep of the rake, was meant to evoke a sense of tranquility and focus the mind. It was fascinating to think that these seemingly simple spaces held such profound meaning. Even more fascinating and slightly bizarre was the fact that samurai sometimes carried miniature versions of these gardens in their helmets. Imagine going into battle with a tiny, portable stress reliever nestled amongst your war gear. Talk about a contrast. And then there was the scholarly debate swirling around these gardens, a constant hum of academic discussion. Historians still argued over the true origins and meanings of different elements. Were the rocks simply aesthetic choices, or did they represent islands in a cosmic sea? Was the raked gravel meant to evoke flowing water, or something more abstract? A representation of the void? I smiled, imagining academics locked in heated debates over the precise angle of a rake stroke. It made me feel a little less silly about my own occasional obsessions. I paused by a small pond, its surface reflecting the pale sky. Koi carp, fat and orange, glided through the water, their movements slow and deliberate. These fish, I realized, had probably witnessed more samurai drama than I'd seen episodes of, well, let's just say more than I'd seen of Bridgerton. They'd likely seen generations of monks come and go, heard countless whispered prayers and fervent chants. They'd probably even witnessed a few clandestine ninja skirmishes, if the rumors I'd heard were even half true. Silent witnesses to centuries of history, swimming in their placid pond. It was a humbling thought. The garden's quietness, after the earlier chaos of the petal storm, amplified its peacefulness. The contrast was stark, like stepping out of a bustling marketplace into a hushed sanctuary. The world outside, with its constant demands and distractions, seemed to fade away. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, and let the stillness settle around me. I could understand, finally, the appeal of mindful raking. The repetitive motion, the focus on the present moment, the creation of order from apparent chaos, it was oddly soothing. I imagined myself, rake in hand, smoothing out the gravel, my mind emptying of all thoughts except the task at hand. It wouldn't be a bad way to spend an afternoon. The gravel itself was fascinating. It wasn't just any gravel. It was meticulously chosen and arranged. Each stone seemed to have been placed with intention, creating patterns that shifted and changed as I moved. I wondered about the monks who tended this garden, their quiet dedication, their daily rituals. Did they find solace in the repetitive tasks, or did their minds wander as they worked? Did they ever get frustrated with unruly pebbles or errant leaves? Did they ever, in a moment of weakness, just kick the gravel into a messy pile and yell at the sky? I chuckled softly to myself. Probably not. I circled the pond, watching the koi. They seemed oblivious to my presence, absorbed in their own slow, underwater dance. I envied their tranquility, their seeming detachment from the world's worries. I wished I could just slip into the cool water and join them, leaving my anxieties behind on the bank. Perhaps that was the point of the garden, after all. Not to escape the world entirely, but to find a space within it where you could reconnect with something deeper, something calmer. The air grew cooler as the afternoon wore on. The shadows lengthened, stretching across the gravel like long, thin fingers. Reluctantly, I turned to leave, knowing I couldn't linger forever. But as I walked back towards the monastery buildings, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt before. The garden's secrets, it seemed, weren't hidden in cryptic symbols or elaborate designs. They were in the quietness, the stillness, the simple act of observing and being present. They were in the gentle rustle of the leaves, the slow glide of the koi, the soft crunch of gravel beneath my feet. And perhaps, just perhaps, they were also in the tiny hidden gardens tucked inside the helmets of long-dead samurai. A reminder, even in the midst of chaos, to find a moment of peace, a moment of mindfulness, a moment to breathe. It was a lesson I wouldn't soon forget. The bronze cooled in the late afternoon sun, a dull, burnished glow replacing the fiery orange of just moments before. The bellmaker, his face etched with lines of fatigue and anticipation, ran a calloused hand over the intricate carvings that adorned its surface. Dragons coiled around flowering lotus blossoms, a testament to both his skill and the reverence with which he approached his craft. He picked up a wooden mallet, its head worn smooth from countless strikes, and tapped the bell gently. A deep, resonant tone filled the air, vibrating through the garden and beyond. It wasn't merely a sound, it was a presence, a wave of energy that washed over everything. The air itself seemed to hum with the note, a low, sustained thrum that resonated deep within the chest. Such bells, the bellmaker explained, had echoed through temple courtyards for centuries, marking the passage of time and calling monks to prayer. Their sound was interwoven with the very fabric of Buddhist practice, a sonic reminder of the impermanence of all things and the pursuit of enlightenment. He went on to tell of how some samurai, steeped in superstition and a warrior's code of honor, believed that the sound of a bell could ward off evil spirits. They saw it as a kind of sonic shield, a vibrational barrier against unseen forces that might threaten their spirit or their resolve in battle. The idea, he chuckled, seemed outlandish now, a relic of a more mystical time. But who knew, he mused, perhaps there was something to it after all. The reverberations of the bell still hung in the air, a subtle but persistent reminder of its power. I found myself thinking about how deeply embedded these beliefs were in the culture, how intertwined religion and warriorhood had become. The bellmaker's story had sparked a curiosity in me, a desire to understand the complex relationship between Buddhism and the samurai. I knew that historians debated the extent of Buddhism's influence. Was it the dominant force shaping samurai values, as some claimed? Or was it merely one piece of a complex puzzle, interwoven with Shinto beliefs, Confucian ethics, and the pragmatic realities of a life lived on the edge of a sword? It was a fascinating question, and one I resolved to explore further. The sound of the bell seemed to resonate through my very being, a physical sensation as much as an auditory one. My whole body vibrated with the lingering tone, and I realized with a strange sense of clarity that this might be the closest I'd ever come to a spiritual experience. The world seemed to fall away, leaving only the fading echoes of the bell and a profound sense of peace. It was a moment of unexpected tranquility, a brief respite from the constant churn of thoughts and anxieties that usually occupied my mind. As the final vibrations faded, the bellmaker turned to me, a knowing smile on his face. "Each bell," he said, his voice soft, "has its own voice." I nodded, still feeling the subtle hum of the bell within me. I thought about all the bells I'd heard in my life, the cheerful jingle of bicycle bells, the somber toll of church bells, the insistent clang of alarm bells. They were all different, each with its own unique timbre and resonance. Some bells, like this one, truly did sing, their voices rich and complex, filled with an almost ethereal quality. Others, well, they just kind of clanged. They served their purpose, announcing the time or signaling a warning, but they lacked the depth and resonance of a truly well-crafted bell. This bell, however, was different. It was more than just a metal object. It was a vessel for sound, a conduit for something beyond the purely physical. It was a reminder of the power of craftsmanship, the ability of human hands to create something that could touch the soul. It was a testament to the enduring legacy of tradition, the passing down of knowledge and skill from one generation to the next. And it was, perhaps, a glimpse into the spiritual heart of a culture I was only beginning to understand. The experience lingered with me long after the sound of the bell had faded completely. I found myself drawn back to the garden, compelled to stand before the bronze creation and listen, not for the sound itself, but for the echo of its resonance within me. It was a feeling I couldn't quite explain, a sense of connection to something larger than myself. I wondered about the countless hands that had shaped and molded the metal, the countless ears that had heard its voice over the centuries. And I wondered about the stories it held within its bronze shell, The whispers of prayers and chants, the echoes of battles and ceremonies, the hopes and fears of generations past. The bellmaker's words kept ringing in my ears. Each bell has its own voice. I understood now what he meant. It wasn't just about the sound itself. It was about the stories the bell carried, the history it embodied, the emotions it evoked. It was about the way it resonated with the listener, touching something deep within their being. And this particular bell had spoken to me in a way I never expected. It had awakened something within me, a sense of wonder and awe, a yearning for something more. And as I walked away from the garden, I carried the echo of its voice with me, a resonant reminder of the power of sound, the beauty of craftsmanship, and the enduring mystery of the human spirit. I joined them at the low table, the aroma of the brewing tea already thick in the air. The bellmaker and the challenger sat opposite each other, their earlier animosity seemingly diffused, at least for the moment. It was strange to see them like this, two sides of a sharpened coin, suddenly finding common ground. Apparently, even sworn enemies could bond over a good beverage. And this, I was learning, was more than just a casual cup. The tea ceremony was an important social ritual in samurai society, a fact that seemed almost at odds with the image of stoic warriors. I tried to imagine these two, locked in a deadly duel one moment, then meticulously preparing tea the next. There was a quiet formality to their movements, as the bellmaker with surprising grace handled the delicate porcelain. He poured the steaming liquid into small, handleless cups. I'd read somewhere that samurai sometimes used tea to test for poison, like some sort of medieval taste tester. A sip for your enemy, then a sip for yourself. A morbid thought, but it added another layer of intrigue to the ritual unfolding before me. As the bellmaker offered me a cup, I couldn't help but think about the scholarly debates surrounding these ceremonies. Historians still pore over ancient texts, examining the ways in which tea ceremonies reflected social status and power dynamics in samurai society. Was it a unifying ritual, a moment of shared humanity amidst the harsh realities of their lives? Or was it a subtle way to assert dominance, a performance of refined etiquette used to subtly show off one's superior breeding and knowledge? I watched the two men, their expressions carefully neutral, and wondered what unspoken currents flowed beneath the surface of this seemingly peaceful exchange. I took the proffered cup, the warmth radiating through the thin porcelain. I brought it to my lips and took a tentative sip. My face probably crumpled involuntarily. It was bitter, intensely so, with an earthy, almost grassy flavor that clung to the back of my throat. It was a far cry from the sugary coffee I was used to, the kind that jolted you awake in the morning with its sweet, caffeinated embrace. I suddenly found myself intensely missing the familiar comfort of my usual brew. "This tea," the challenger said, his voice low and resonant, "clears the mind." My mind, however, was currently filled with thoughts of sugar. Granulated, cubed, brown, doesn't matter. Just sweet. I took another sip, trying to appreciate the supposed clarity it was bringing, but mostly just feeling the bitterness intensify. I imagined the challenger's mind, a vast, empty expanse, devoid of all thought, while mine was a chaotic jumble of sugar plums and caffeine cravings. The bellmaker watched me with a faint amusement in his eyes. He seemed to sense my internal struggle. He took a slow, deliberate sip from his own cup, the picture of serene composure. "It is an acquired taste," he admitted, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his lips, "but one that rewards patience." Patience was not one of my virtues, especially when it came to beverages. I preferred instant gratification, the quick hit of sweetness and energy. But I persevered, taking small sips, trying to decipher the nuances of flavor that they clearly appreciated. There was something undeniably calming about the ritual itself, the quiet clinking of cups, the slow, deliberate movements. I could almost understand the appeal, the way it forced you to slow down, to be present in the moment. "It is said," the challenger continued, his gaze fixed on some distant point, "that the best tea is made with water drawn at dawn, from a spring high in the mountains." I imagined myself hiking up a mountain at the crack of dawn, just to get some fancy water for tea that tasted like dirt. The dedication was admirable, if a little excessive. I glanced at the bellmaker, wondering if he'd actually done that. He seemed capable of it. "There is a certain purity to it," the bellmaker agreed, his voice soft, untouched by the world below. I nodded, trying to look like I understood the profound significance of mountain spring water. My mind, however, was still stubbornly fixated on the lack of sugar. I was starting to feel a caffeine withdrawal headache coming on. I needed something, anything, to sweeten the deal. The silence stretched between us, punctuated only by the occasional sip. I watched the steam curl upwards from my cup, dissipating into the air. The bitterness was starting to recede, replaced by a strange, almost vegetal sweetness. Maybe there was something to this after all. The tea, the bellmaker said, breaking the silence, is like life itself. Bitter at times, but with hidden depths waiting to be discovered. It was a surprisingly philosophical statement, and I found myself considering it, even through the haze of my caffeine deprivation. Maybe he was right. Maybe life, like this tea, wasn't meant to be constantly sweet and easy. Maybe the bitterness was necessary, a counterpoint to the sweetness, a reminder that even in the harshest of circumstances, there was always something to be savored if you were willing to look for it. I took another sip, this time without grimacing. The bitterness was still there, but it no longer overwhelmed. I could taste the subtle earthiness, the hint of something floral, the quiet complexity that had eluded me before. Maybe, just maybe, I was starting to acquire the taste, or maybe I was just delirious from lack of sugar. Either way, I finished my cup, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. It wasn't the same as my usual caffeine rush, but it was something different, something clear. The sky bleeds into deeper shades of violet, then indigo. The air, thick and humid from the day's heat, begins to cool, a welcome reprieve. The vibrant tapestry of village life, the shouts of children, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the rhythmic thwack of the rice pounder, slowly unravels, replaced by a hush that deepens with the twilight. Lanterns begin to flicker, warm pinpricks of light against the encroaching darkness. Across the narrow, dirt streets, families are closing their shutters, heavy wooden panels sliding into place with a reassuring thud. Bars are drawn across doorways, and the last vestiges of daylight fade from the cracks. This ritual of securing homes against the night feels ancient, ingrained in the very fabric of the village. In these isolated pockets of medieval Japan, communal defense was paramount. Each household was a link in a chain, relying on its neighbors for protection in a world where central authority was often distant and tenuous. I watched the bellmaker, his weathered face etched with the lines of a life lived outdoors, carefully securing his workshop. He meticulously checks each latch, his movements precise and deliberate, as if performing a sacred rite. The large bronze bell, his masterpiece and the village's voice, hangs silent within, its rich tones stilled until the morning. Night is a dangerous time, he says, turning to me, his voice low and gravelly, but also a time for rest. He looks up at the darkening sky, a glimmer of something, respect, perhaps, or even acceptance, in his eyes. It's a simple statement, yet it strikes me with its profound truth. Dangerous and restful. Two sides of the same coin. It's a pretty good philosophy, I think, not just for life in this village, but for life in general. There's always a duality, a tension between opposing forces, light and shadow, peace and turmoil, life and death. I find myself thinking about the samurai who passed through the village earlier. He carried himself with a quiet intensity, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his katana. I remember hearing a story, perhaps just a village legend, that some samurai believed sleeping with their swords under their pillows improved their dreams. Like a warrior's dream catcher, warding off nightmares and filling their sleep with visions of valor and victory. It's a strange image, this blend of lethal practicality and almost childlike superstition. But then again, this is a world where the line between the mundane and the supernatural often blurs. The bellmaker's words echo in my mind as I observe the village settling into slumber. Dangerous and restful. The idea of danger lurking in the darkness is palpable. The rustling of leaves in the nearby forest takes on a sinister edge. The shadows seem to lengthen and deepen, concealing unseen threats. Historians still debate the extent to which banditry and warfare actually disrupted the daily lives of people in these villages. Was it a constant looming threat, shaping every decision and interaction? Or was it a more sporadic occurrence, an occasional disruption in an otherwise peaceful existence? The evidence is fragmented, open to interpretation. Village records are scarce, often lost to fire or decay. Official chronicles tend to focus on the grand narratives of powerful lords and epic battles, leaving the experiences of ordinary people in the shadows. I think about the stories I've heard whispered around the village fires, tales of bandits raiding outlying farmsteads, of villages put to the torch, of families forced to flee into the mountains. These stories, passed down through generations, are imbued with a chilling realism that suggests they are more than just campfire tales. They speak of a vulnerability, a precariousness that underlies the seemingly tranquil surface of village life. Yet, despite this undercurrent of danger, there's also a profound sense of peace that descends upon the village with the night. The air is still, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. Lanterns cast a soft, warm glow, illuminating the interiors of homes. Families gather together, sharing meals, telling stories, and finding solace in each other's company. This is the other side of the coin, the restful aspect of the night. A time for community, for connection, for respite from the labors of the day. The contrast is stark, and yet, somehow, harmonious. The danger, whether real or perceived, enhances the preciousness of the peace. It makes the simple act of closing one's shutters, of sharing a meal with loved ones, a small act of defiance against the darkness. It's a reminder that even in the face of uncertainty, life continues. People find ways to adapt, to endure, to find moments of joy and connection amidst the shadows. As the last sliver of light disappears from the horizon, and the village is enveloped in darkness, I can almost feel the collective breath of its inhabitants slowing, settling into the rhythm of the night. The world outside, with its dangers and uncertainties, fades away, replaced by the warmth and security of home. For now, at least, the village sleeps. And in its slumber it finds both sanctuary and strength, preparing itself for the dawn that will inevitably break, bringing with it a new day and a new cycle of light and shadow, peace and turmoil. "Why not?" I muttered to myself, adjusting the ill-fitting leather helmet. Dodging a duel with a disgruntled fishmonger had somehow landed me on the village night watch. It seemed a reasonable alternative to, well, disembowelment. Besides, how hard could a little patrolling be? I'd face down a man with a very sharp knife. Surely a few hours of walking around in the dark wouldn't be as nerve-wracking. I knew from my, let's call it extensive reading, that village night watches were a common thing throughout history. Small communities, often lacking any formal military presence, relied on the collective efforts of their citizens to protect themselves. It was a fascinating system, really. Sort of a neighborhood watch, but with significantly less gossip and considerably more potential for running into actual danger. I even remembered reading something about certain samurai clans who practiced night fighting techniques, using the darkness and stealth to their advantage. Imagine that, silent assassins flitting through the shadows. A far cry from me, stumbling over loose stones in this oversized helmet. And that brought to mind another fascinating historical debate. Just how effective were these village defense strategies? Some scholars argued that they served as a powerful deterrent, the collective presence of watchful eyes enough to scare off potential bandits. Others believed they were largely symbolic, a comforting ritual rather than a practical defense against determined raiders. I guess tonight I might get a little first-hand insight into that particular academic squabble. The gravel path crunched under my sandals as I trudged through the sleeping village. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the night breeze and the distant hoot of an owl. Each creak of a shutter, or sigh of the wind, sent a little shiver down my spine. I tried to project an air of alertness, scanning the darkened houses and alleys, squinting into the shadows. In reality, most of my concentration was focused on not tripping over something, a stray root, a discarded farm implement, or one of the numerous sleeping dogs that littered the streets. My hand instinctively went to the small wooden club tucked into my belt. It wasn't much, but it was something. I imagined myself wielding it with the grace and precision of a seasoned warrior, deflecting blows, disarming assailants. Then I nearly stumbled over a particularly large rock, and the fantasy dissolved into a nervous chuckle. The air grew colder as the hours crept by. The moon, a sliver in the inky sky, provided little illumination. I found myself relying more on sound than sight, my ears straining for any sign of trouble. The silence, initially peaceful, now felt oppressive, amplifying every small noise. A faint scratching sound reached my ears. I froze, my hand tightening on my club. It came again, closer this time. My heart pounded in my chest. Bandits? Raiders? Ninja assassins? My breath hitched in my throat as a dark shape detached itself from the shadows of a nearby building. It crept towards me. Low to the ground, its eyes gleaming in the faint moonlight, I braced myself, ready to defend the village from a cat. The cat, a sleek, black creature, sauntered past me, completely oblivious to my near heart attack. It paused, stretched languidly, and then disappeared around the corner of a house. I let out a long, shaky breath, the tension slowly draining from my body. Okay, I whispered to myself. Crisis averted. I resumed my patrol, feeling a little foolish. Still, the encounter with the cat had jolted me awake. My senses felt sharper, my awareness heightened. I scanned the darkened streets with renewed vigilance, my hand still hovering near my club. The rest of the night passed without incident. The occasional distant dog bark, the creak of a settling house, the rustling of leaves. These were the only sounds that punctuated the silence. As the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had survived my first night on the village watch. I wasn't sure if I had deterred any would-be bandits or raiders, but I had definitely avoided tripping over any more cats. And, as I trudged back towards my lodgings, the rising sun painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I realized that maybe, just maybe, this whole night watch thing wasn't so bad after all. Perhaps there was a certain satisfaction in contributing to the safety of the village, in playing a small part in the ancient tradition of communal protection. Or maybe I was just relieved that I hadn't had to use my tiny wooden club. Either way, I was looking forward to a long, uninterrupted sleep, and maybe a nice, hot cup of tea. Whispers. Faint, sibilant like dry leaves skittering across cobblestones. In the suffocating darkness, they snag on the edges of my awareness, pulling me from the hazy realm of half-sleep. It's a familiar sound, this hushed exchange of secrets under the cloak of night. After all, in a time long before town criers with their fancy bells, and even longer before the printing press churned out pamphlets like a blacksmith's forge churns out horseshoes, most news traveled by word of mouth. One person telling another, and that one telling two more, and so on and so forth until the entire village, from the baker's wife to the manure-shoveling stable boy, knew the latest happenings. It's a bit like how they say those samurai fellows in the Far East, or is it West, used to pass along coded messages woven into the fabric of poems or songs. Clever, that. Though I suppose sometimes it's hard to know what to believe. Even scholars today debate the role of gossip and rumor in shaping medieval life. Was it a reliable source of information, a crude but effective newspaper of the times, or just noise, a jumble of speculation and exaggeration? Difficult to tell, really. Intrigued, I slip from beneath the scratchy wool blanket. The stone floor sends a chill up my bare feet, but the whispers beckon, their allure stronger than the discomfort. I creep closer, my steps muffled by the rushes strewn across the floor. I have to know. What secrets are they sharing under this velvet curtain of night? The voices emanate from the adjacent room, barely a crack of light escaping from beneath the ill-fitting door. Two women, I gather from the timbre. Their words, though hushed, carry a distinct weight, a sense of shared conspiracy. Did you hear about the Lord's new sword? One of them says, her voice a low murmur, like the rustling of silk. My ears prick up. The Lord's new sword? Now that's something worth eavesdropping on. It's said to be forged from a fallen star, the other woman replies, a hint of awe coloring her tone. A fallen star. My breath hitches. Please, let it be true. Let it be true. Because if it is true, that makes it less like some fancy, expensive sports car the Lord is showing off, and more, lightsaber. A proper, mythical, magical weapon. One worthy of legends, of ballads sung by wandering minstrels. A sword that whispers tales of cosmic fire and celestial power. The kind of sword that could cleave a dragon in two, or banish a horde of demons back to the abyss from whence they came. I press my ear against the cool wood of the door, straining to catch every syllable. This has the potential to be epic. Fallen star, the first woman repeats, savoring the words. Imagine the power it must hold. They say it glows with an inner light, the second woman adds, her voice laced with a touch of fear. And that it hums with an unearthly energy. A glow? A hum? My imagination runs wild. I picture the Lord standing tall and proud, the starlight sword radiating a celestial aura, illuminating his grim face with an otherworldly light. He raises the blade, and the air around him crackles with power, the very stones beneath his feet trembling in anticipation. Old man Fitzwilliam swears he saw it with his own eyes, the first woman continues. Said it was like looking at the sun, only colder. Old man Fitzwilliam, not exactly known for his reliability. He once claimed he'd wrestled a griffin to the ground, only to later admit he'd tripped over a particularly large goose. Still, a flicker of hope remains. Even a broken clock is right twice a day, as they say. But Fitzwilliam also claims he can talk to squirrels, the second woman retorts, a note of skepticism in her voice. Right, the squirrel thing. That does put a damper on his credibility. True, the first woman concedes. But even Father Michael seemed uneasy when he spoke of it. Father Michael. Now that's interesting. The village priest. A man of God, not given to flights of fancy or wild exaggerations. If he's uneasy, then there might be something to this after all. Perhaps there is more to the Lord's new sword than meets the eye. He said it was blessed, the second woman whispers, her voice barely audible. Blessed by something. Blessed by something. The vagueness is tantalizing. Blessed by an angel? A forgotten god? A powerful sorcerer dwelling in the hidden depths of the Whispering Woods? The possibilities are endless. The conversation lulls, punctuated by the crackling of the fire in the hearth. I hold my breath, hoping they'll continue. I need to know more. This whisper of a rumor, this fragment of a story has ignited a spark of wonder within me. In a world often defined by the mundane, the predictable, the sheer boredom of everyday life, the prospect of something extraordinary, something magical, is like a beacon in the darkness. Then, just as I'm about to give up and return to my cold, hard bed, the first woman speaks again. They say, she begins, her voice barely above a whisper, that the Lord plans to use it. Use it? Use it for what? To vanquish a monstrous beast terrorizing the countryside? To defend the kingdom from a barbarian invasion? To carve his name into the annals of history as the greatest hero of the age? My heart pounds in my chest, anticipation thrumming through my veins. To cut the ribbon at the opening of the new bakery. The new bakery? The air rushes out of me like a punctured wineskin. All that talk of fallen stars and celestial power for a bakery? The letdown is almost physically painful. It's like reaching for the heavens and grasping only a stale loaf of bread. I slump against the door, the whispers now sounding less like secrets and more like, well, gossip. Just noise, after all. The kind of idle chatter that fills the void between harvests and festivals, a fleeting distraction from the monotony of daily life. Still, a small part of me, the part that still clings to the belief in the extraordinary, can't help but wonder, what if? What if, beneath the mundane veneer, there's still a flicker of something more? What if the Lord's new sword, even if intended for ribbon-cutting ceremonies, truly is forged from a fallen star? Perhaps, just perhaps, it holds a secret power, waiting to be unleashed. The deep, resonant hum of the bell throbbed in the air, a sound richer and fuller than any he'd produced before. It pulsed outwards, a wave of bronze song washing over the valley. The intricate cherry blossom motif he'd painstakingly carved into the bell's surface, along with the inscription dedicated to the village's guardian deity, seemed to vibrate with the sound, as if the metal itself was alive. He'd spent weeks on the design, drawing inspiration from ancient scrolls depicting temple bells adorned with swirling dragons and celestial beings. Each petal, each curve of a branch, each stroke of the calligraphic inscription held meaning. He wasn't just casting bronze. He was pouring history, belief, and artistry into every molten drop. The old masters he knew had imbued their bells with prayers and blessings, transforming them into something more than mere instruments of timekeeping. He remembered reading accounts of bells so large they required the combined strength of dozens of men to ring, their tones so profound they were said to reach the heavens. Some of the most elaborate bells, cast for powerful temples and monasteries, were adorned with depictions of Buddhist deities, mythical creatures, and intricate scenes from sacred texts. He'd even come across a particularly intriguing passage describing how certain samurai clans believed the sound of a temple bell could guide the lost souls of fallen warriors, a beacon of sound cutting through the fog of the afterlife. He'd always wondered if such beliefs stemmed from the sheer power of the sound, its ability to resonate not just in the physical world, but also within the human spirit. He wasn't sure if he'd achieved that level of spiritual resonance with his own creation, but standing there, bathed in the bell's deep reverberations, he felt a sense of profound satisfaction. It was a far cry from the sticky, muffled thuds of the keyboard he'd been hammering on just a few short weeks ago. The transition from keyboard gunk to bell resonance, he mused, was a definite upgrade. Progress. He knew that historians and scholars still debated the true nature of medieval Japanese bell-making. Was it purely a practical craft, a technical exercise in metallurgy and acoustics? Or was there something more, an artistic expression woven into the very fabric of the bell? The intricate designs, the symbolic inscriptions, the sheer beauty of the finished product, they all pointed to something beyond mere functionality. He recalled a scholarly article that discussed the meticulous process of preparing the clay molds, the precise mixture of metals, the painstaking tuning achieved through careful shaping and adjustments. The article argued that the bell makers of that era possessed a deep understanding of both science and art, blending them seamlessly to create objects of both practical and aesthetic significance. Even the selection of the location for the casting process was imbued with ritualistic meaning, often chosen for its auspicious feng shui or proximity to sacred sites. Another historian he'd encountered, however, argued that the artistic embellishments were simply a reflection of the patron's wealth and status, a way to demonstrate their piety and devotion through extravagant displays. This perspective downplayed the artistic agency of the bell makers themselves, reducing their role to that of skilled craftsmen executing the designs dictated by their patrons. He'd spent hours poring over these conflicting interpretations, fascinated by the ongoing debate. He ran his hand over the cooling bronze, feeling the subtle textures of the carvings beneath his fingertips. He'd poured his own heart and soul into this bell, just as the ancient masters had done. Whether it was art or craft, or perhaps a harmonious blend of both, didn't really matter. What mattered was the sound, the way it filled the night air, the way it seemed to resonate deep within him. As the last vibrations faded into the stillness of the night, he heard the soft padding of footsteps approaching. The village elder, his face etched with years of wisdom and experience, stood before him, his eyes fixed on the newly cast bell. He didn't speak for a long moment, simply absorbing the lingering presence of the sound. Finally, he turned to the bellmaker, a slow smile spreading across his face. "It is a beautiful sound," he said, his voice quiet but filled with emotion. "A sound that will bring peace to our village for generations to come." The bellmaker bowed his head, humbled by the elder's words. He knew that the sound of the bell would become a part of the village's life, marking the passage of time, calling the community together, and perhaps even guiding lost souls on their journey. He'd created something more than just a bell. He'd created a voice for the village, a voice that would echo through the years, carrying with it the whispers of history, the murmurs of belief, and the resonant song of his own artistic spirit. He'd found a path beyond the keyboard gunk, a path paved with the rich, enduring resonance of bronze. And for now, that was enough. The flickering orange light drew me back towards the house. Even from a distance, I could feel the warmth radiating from within, a comforting beacon against the deepening twilight. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, carrying the scent of wood smoke and something subtly sweet, like roasting chestnuts. It was a primal pull, this attraction to fire, and I realized with a jolt of surprise that families probably gathered like this for centuries, huddled around the hearth for warmth and light, sharing stories and laughter. It made me think of history class, where we'd learned that the hearth was often the literal and figurative heart of a home, even back in medieval Japan. I slipped off my shoes at the genkan and padded down the polished wood floor towards the main room. The sliding doors were open, revealing the family gathered around the orori, a sunken hearth built into the floor. Grandmother sat on a zabuton cushion, her back straight despite her age, the firelight painting her face in warm hues. The children, 2 boys and a girl, were sprawled around her, their eyes wide with fascination. Even the parents, usually busy with chores or work, were relaxing, sipping tea, and listening intently. Grandmother's voice, a low, soothing rumble, filled the room. She spoke of mythical yokai, mischievous spirits that inhabited the forests and mountains, and of brave samurai who fought to protect their villages. One story involved a tengu with a ridiculously long nose who tricked unsuspecting travelers, and another featured a kitsune, a cunning fox spirit who could shapeshift. I recalled reading something about samurai children playing war games with wooden swords, practicing their future roles. It seemed like a pretty intense childhood. I settled onto a cushion, the warmth of the fire seeping into my chilled bones. The stories were mesmerizing, a tapestry woven with magic and adventure. It was strangely captivating, listening to tales that had likely been passed down through generations, each retelling imbued with the storyteller's unique flair. I found myself getting caught up in the narratives, imagining the clash of swords and the rustle of silk kimonos. It made me think about how much time I spent glued to screens, lost in the digital world. Maybe an evening without the constant bombardment of notifications and the endless scroll of social media wasn't so bad after all. There was a certain magic to the simplicity of it. The connection between storyteller and listener, the shared experience of imagination. It felt real. More real than the pixelated battles and virtual adventures I usually consumed. Still, a nagging curiosity lingered in the back of my mind. Grandmother had just mentioned a warrior who wielded a katana forged from a fallen star. It sounded incredible, almost mythical, like something straight out of a video game. The urge to pull out my phone and Google fallen star katana was almost overwhelming. Was it a real thing? A type of metal? A legendary weapon? The questions itched at me, a familiar pullback to the digital world I thought I was escaping. I resisted, though, reminding myself that sometimes the mystery is more captivating than the answer. Besides, interrupting grandmother mid-story would be rude, and she seemed to be getting to the good part. This particular tale involved a young woman who discovered she was the descendant of a powerful dragon, and she was about to face a fearsome Oni, a giant ogre-like demon, in a battle for her village. Grandmother's voice rose and fell with the drama of the story, her hands gesturing expressively. The children gasped and giggled at the appropriate moments, their faces illuminated by the firelight. The parents exchanged knowing smiles, perhaps remembering these same stories from their own childhoods. It was a scene that felt timeless, a ritual repeated countless times throughout history, across cultures. It struck me then, listening to the crackling fire and the rhythmic cadence of grandmother's voice, that these stories were more than just entertainment. They were a way of passing down history, of instilling cultural values, of teaching moral lessons. The brave warriors and cunning spirits, the triumphs and tragedies, they all held a deeper meaning. I remembered a scholarly debate we'd touched on in history class about the purpose of medieval Japanese folktales. Were they purely for amusement, or did they serve a more profound function? Sitting here, immersed in the warmth and the narrative, I felt like I was getting a glimpse into the answer. The fallen star katana, though still intriguing, faded slightly in importance. The story unfolding before me, the shared experience with this family, the connection to something ancient and powerful, was far more captivating. Perhaps, I thought, some stories are best experienced not through the cold glow of a screen, but through the warm flicker of a fire shared in the company of others. And maybe, just maybe, the unanswered questions, the lingering mysteries, were part of the magic. The tatami mats beneath me felt cool against my skin. Obachan's voice, a low hum recounting tales of brave warriors and mischievous yokai, slowly faded as I drifted into sleep. It was strange, this sleep. I remembered Obachan mentioning how people used to sleep differently, in 2 chunks with a waking period in between. Something about how the darkness wasn't just for sleeping, but also for prayer, contemplation, or even a midnight snack. I wondered what it would be like to wake in the dead of night, the world hushed and still, and then simply go back to sleep. She'd also told me how samurai, before a big battle, would sometimes try to interpret their dreams, searching for a tactical advantage. Imagine planning your attack based on what you saw while sleeping. I smiled, the thought both absurd and strangely intriguing. And all those different ideas about what dreams actually were? Messages from the gods? Glimpses into another world? Or just your brain doing its weird nightly thing? I guess some things never change, even after all these centuries. The debate goes on. Even now, Obachan had said. Scholars poring over old texts, trying to unravel the mysteries of the medieval mind. Then, the dream began. Petals, a swirling blizzard of pink and white, engulfed me. They fell from an unseen sky, a silent, fragrant storm. The air thrummed with a gentle energy, like the buzzing of 1,000 tiny wings. I reached out, my hand disappearing into the soft cloud of blossoms. They brushed against my face, cool and silken. The ground beneath my feet vanished, replaced by a swirling vortex of petals. I felt no fear, only a strange sense of peace. The scent of cherry blossoms intensified, sweet and heady, filling my senses. It was like floating in a fragrant ocean, buoyed by the delicate petals. Suddenly, through the storm of blossoms, two figures emerged. Samurai, their armor gleaming under the filtered light. They moved with a fluid grace, their swords flashing, leaving trails of light in the swirling petals. The clash of steel rang out, sharp and clear, echoing in the strange, dreamlike space. The sound was almost musical, a counterpoint to the whispering rustle of the falling blossoms. Each movement was precise, a deadly dance performed amidst the beauty and chaos of the cherry blossom storm. I watched, mesmerized, unable to look away. The air crackled with an unseen energy, the intensity of their focus palpable even from a distance. The clang of metal ceased. One samurai stood victorious, the other lay still, a small, dark stain spreading on the petal-covered ground. The victor sheathed his sword, the movement smooth and deliberate, and then turned, his gaze seeming to pierce through the veil of blossoms, locking onto mine. For a moment our eyes met. His face was obscured by his helmet, but I could feel the weight of his gaze, intense and searching. Then he bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect or perhaps acknowledgement. He turned and vanished back into the swirling petals, leaving me alone in the fragrant silence. The scene shifted. I found myself in a wooden temple, the air thick with the scent of incense. Deep resonant bells tolled in the distance, their sound vibrating through the very floorboards beneath my feet. The light within the temple was dim, filtered through paper screens, casting long, dancing shadows. Whispers echoed around me, secrets carried on the fragrant air. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was hushed and reverent, tinged with a hint of sadness. I felt drawn towards the altar, a simple wooden structure adorned with cherry blossom branches and flickering candles. As I approached, the whispers grew louder, more urgent, yet still incomprehensible. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the dream faded. The whispers died away, the scent of incense dissipating, replaced by the familiar smell of tatami mats and the faint, earthy scent of the night air. The bells ceased their tolling, leaving a ringing silence in their wake. I opened my eyes, blinking in the darkness. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to paint the sky a pale gray. The memory of the dream clung to me, vivid and strange, a kaleidoscope of images and sensations. The soft caress of falling petals, the sharp clang of steel, the resonant hum of temple bells, the whispered secrets. It was a bizarre tapestry woven from fragments of Obakan's stories, my own imagination, and something else. It was unsettling, yet oddly calming, a reminder of the strange and beautiful world that lay hidden beneath the surface of waking life. The darkness pressed in, thick and absolute. Not the diluted darkness of a city night, stained orange by streetlights, but a profound, primal absence of light. My eyes, wide open, saw nothing but the faintest suggestion of the shoji screen separating me from the rest of the room. It was utterly silent, a silence so deep it felt almost like a physical presence. Of course, night has always held a certain weight. Historically, it was seen as a time of spiritual vulnerability, a time when the veil between worlds thinned and malevolent spirits roamed freely. I remembered reading somewhere that samurai warriors would sometimes meditate in graveyards to conquer their fear of death, a rather extreme form of exposure therapy, I suppose. The thought brought a strange chill, despite the summer heat clinging to the air. There's a scholarly debate raging even now about how medieval Japanese beliefs about the afterlife shaped their attitudes towards death and dying. Was it fear, acceptance, or something more complicated, woven into the very fabric of their existence? I lay there for a moment, suspended in the stillness. The soft rhythm of breathing rose and fell around me. My wife, my children, nestled in their own futons. Their presence was a comfort, a grounding force in the alien quiet. Yet, the silence itself was different from the quiet of my own home. Deeper, more ancient. It felt layered, as though the house itself were breathing, exhaling the accumulated silences of generations past. It made me wonder, absurdly, if there was such a thing as a noise-canceling futon. Could they somehow weave centuries of quiet into the cotton padding? I shifted slightly, the rustling of the thin mattress loud in the stillness. The tatami mats beneath creaked softly, a sound both familiar and foreign. Back home, the night was punctuated by the hum of the refrigerator, the distant drone of traffic, the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. Here, there was only this profound, all-encompassing quiet. It was unsettling, yet strangely compelling. It forced me to confront the silence within myself, the thoughts and anxieties usually masked by the constant background noise of modern life. My mind wandered back to the day's events. The bustling market, the vibrant colors of the kimono-clad women, the ancient temples with their towering wooden beams and intricate carvings. It felt like a lifetime ago. This house, this room, existed in a different time, a different rhythm. I could almost feel the weight of history pressing down on me. The echoes of lives lived within these same walls. Had others woken in the same darkness, centuries ago, listening to the same silence? What had they thought? What had they feared? The thought of the samurai in the graveyard returned. Their courage, or perhaps their desperation to confront death head-on, struck me as both admirable and unsettling. What did they see in the darkness? What did they hear in the silence? Did they find peace? Or did they find something else entirely? My own fear, I realized, wasn't of ghosts or spirits. It was something more amorphous, more existential. It was the fear of the unknown, the fear of the vastness of time and history, the fear of my own smallness in the face of it all. Lying there in the darkness, surrounded by the quiet breathing of my family, I felt a strange disconnect, a sense of being both present and absent, anchored to this moment yet adrift in the currents of time. The air grew heavy, thick with the humidity of the approaching dawn. I closed my eyes, trying to find solace in the darkness. Perhaps the samurai were right. Perhaps confronting the darkness, embracing the silence, was the only way to truly understand it. Perhaps it wasn't about conquering fear, but about accepting it as a natural part of the human experience. I thought about the scholarly debate about medieval Japanese attitudes towards death. Was it fear or acceptance? Maybe it was neither, or perhaps it was both. Maybe it was something that shifted and changed, a dance between light and shadow, life and death, silence and sound. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the darkness began to soften. A faint gray light filtered through the shoji screens, hinting at the approaching dawn. The silence remained, but it felt different now. Less oppressive, more expectant. The world outside was waking up, and with it, a sense of peace settled over me. The fear hadn't vanished entirely, but it had receded, replaced by a quiet awe, a sense of gratitude for the simple act of being alive, of being present in this moment, in this ancient, silent house. The night had been a journey, a descent into the darkness. And now, with the coming of dawn, I was emerging, changed, transformed, ready to face the new day. The moon's glow filters through the cracks in the shutters, thin slivers of silver in the otherwise dark room. It reminds me, strangely enough, of Lady Hiroko's fan, the way the light spills through the delicate latticework, casting intricate patterns on the walls. Back then, I wouldn't have given a second thought to the moon, just another light in the night sky. But Master Kenji, ever the scholar, explained that in medieval times, the moon wasn't just a light, it was a clock, a calendar, a vital tool for marking the passage of time. Farmers planted and harvested by its cycles, travelers navigated by its position, and entire societies structured their lives around its phases. He also told me, with a twinkle in his eye, that some samurai believed the moon influenced their swordsmanship. They'd practice under the full moon, convinced it sharpened their senses, and enhanced their connection to the blade. Almost like the moon itself imbued their steel with power. A bit fanciful, perhaps, but it adds a certain romanticism to the image of a lone warrior, bathed in moonlight, perfecting his art. Master Kenji, bless his inquisitive soul, often pondered such things. He would spend hours poring over ancient texts, debating with other scholars about the ways medieval Japanese beliefs about celestial bodies shaped their understanding of the natural world. Was it a scientific perspective, rooted in observation and calculation, or a spiritual one, infused with myth and reverence? The debate continues even now, with historians still analyzing ancient astronomical charts and religious texts, trying to unravel the complex relationship between science and spirituality in those times. I watch as the moonlight paints silver lines on the wooden floor, long, elegant strokes across the aged planks. The way it illuminates the dust motes dancing in the air, the way it transforms the mundane into something almost magical, It's breathtaking. This, I think, would make a great Instagram photo. The contrast between the dark wood and the bright moonlight, the subtle texture of the grain, perfect. I can almost picture the filters, the captions, hashtag moonlight magic, hashtag medieval vibes, hashtag Japanese nights. If Instagram existed, of course. It's a strange thought, this yearning for a technology that doesn't exist. A way to share this moment with people who haven't even been born yet. It makes me feel disconnected, like I'm straddling two worlds, the one I inhabit and the one I sometimes dream of. The silence in the room is broken, only by the gentle creaking of the house settling around me. It's a comforting sound, a familiar lullaby that's been with me since I arrived in this time. I run my hand over the smooth surface of the floor, tracing the lines of moonlight with my fingertip. The wood is cool beneath my touch, a stark contrast to the lingering warmth of the day. The moon, I realize, is more than just a timekeeper or a muse for warriors. It's a constant, a silent witness to the passage of time, the ebb and flow of history. It's been there, watching over the world, for centuries, illuminating the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and tragedies of countless generations. It shone down on samurai practicing their swordsmanship, on farmers tending their fields, on lovers whispering secrets in the shadows. And now it shines down on me, a lone traveler in a strange land lost in thought and contemplation. I imagine what it must have been like to live in a time when the moon was your only clock, your only guide through the darkness. To look up at the night sky and see not just a celestial body, but a powerful force that shaped your life, your beliefs, your very understanding of the universe. It's a humbling thought, a reminder of how much we take for granted in our modern world. The moonlight shifts slightly, the lines on the floor lengthening and stretching as the moon continues its slow journey across the sky. I close my eyes, breathing in the stillness of the night, the scent of wood and tatami mats. For a moment, I can almost believe I'm not a stranger here, not a traveler displaced in time, but simply a part of this ancient world, connected to the past, present, and future by the silent, watchful gaze of the moon. I wonder if, centuries ago, someone sat in this very room, bathed in the same moonlight, pondering the same mysteries of the universe. Did they feel the same sense of awe and wonder? The same connection to something larger than themselves? Did they too yearn for a way to share their experience, to capture the beauty of the moon's glow and share it with the world? It's a comforting thought, this idea of a shared experience across time, a connection forged by the simple act of looking up at the moon. Perhaps, in some way, we are connected, those unknown observers of the past and me, bound together by the silver threads of moonlight that have illuminated the world for millennia. I open my eyes, the image of the moonlit floor imprinted on my mind. It's a memory I'll carry with me, a reminder of the beauty and mystery that surrounds us, even in the darkest of nights. A reminder that even in a world without Instagram, some moments are simply too beautiful to forget. The whispers returned, but this time, they weren't the children's playful chatter. These were hushed, serious tones, the voices of parents burdened by the realities of their time. I could hear snatches of conversations, anxieties woven into hopes, fears masked by determined optimism. "May she live to see her grandchildren," one mother murmured, her voice thick with a longing that resonated deeply. Another voice, a father's, echoed the sentiment, "May he live long enough to take over the farm." It struck me then, the weight of their words, the fragility of life in this era. Life expectancy in medieval Japan was heartbreakingly short. A child reaching adulthood was a cause for celebration, a testament to resilience against the constant threats of disease, famine, and conflict. 30 or 40 years was considered a long life, a blessing bestowed upon only a fortunate few. The whispers were a stark reminder of this precarious existence, a constant awareness of mortality that shaped their every thought and action. I recalled a quirky tidbit I'd once encountered in my research, the tradition of samurai composing death poems before battle. These weren't morbid pronouncements, but rather poignant expressions of acceptance, a way to leave a final mark on the world, acknowledging the ever-present possibility of death. Even the warrior class, revered for their strength and courage, lived with this understanding, this intimate dance with mortality. It wasn't just a philosophical concept. It was woven into the fabric of their lives, a constant companion. The parents' whispers continued, revealing the simplicity of their dreams. "A good harvest this year," one prayed, his voice raspy with weariness. enough to feed the family through the winter. Another hope for peace. May the fighting end, she pleaded. May our sons return home safe. Their desires weren't grand or ambitious, but rooted in the basic necessities of survival, the fundamental yearning for stability in a world often defined by uncertainty. These weren't abstract anxieties fueled by existential dread. They were tangible concerns, born from the harsh realities of their daily lives. Disease was a constant threat, a shadow lurking in every corner. Dysentery, influenza, smallpox. These weren't just names in a history book, but grim realities that regularly decimated families and communities. Infant mortality was staggeringly high, a constant source of grief for parents who often witnessed the devastating loss of multiple children. The whispers reflected this heartbreaking reality, the ever-present fear of losing those they held most dear. Beyond disease, warfare was another significant contributor to the high mortality rates. Medieval Japan was a period of near-constant conflict, a tumultuous landscape of shifting alliances and power struggles. Farmers were conscripted into armies, leaving their families vulnerable and their fields untended. Villages were raided, lives lost in the crossfire of ambition and political maneuvering. The parents' pleas for peace weren't just idealistic yearnings, but desperate cries for an end to the violence that ripped families apart and threatened their very survival. Even in times of relative peace, the specter of famine loomed large. A single failed harvest could have devastating consequences, plunging communities into starvation and desperation. The precarious balance between survival and starvation rested on the whims of nature, the unpredictable cycles of rain and sun. The whispers for a good harvest weren't just expressions of hope, but vital prayers for sustenance, for the ability to feed their families and endure another season. This scholarly debate about the primary factors contributing to high mortality rates in medieval Japan continues to this day. Was it primarily disease, warfare, or perhaps a combination of factors, including malnutrition and inadequate sanitation? Historians sift through the limited records, examining skeletal remains and analyzing historical accounts, attempting to piece together a comprehensive understanding of the challenges faced by the people of this era. The whispers, while intangible, offer a glimpse into the lived experiences of these individuals, their hopes and fears, their struggles and resilience. The whispers also highlighted the stark contrast between their world and my own. In my time, advancements in medicine, sanitation, and agriculture have dramatically increased life expectancy. Childhood diseases that once claimed countless lives are now largely preventable. Food security, while not universally achieved, is far more prevalent. The whispers served as a poignant reminder of the progress made, the advancements that have transformed the human experience, and the ongoing need to address the inequalities that still persist. The parents' whispers, laden with anxieties and hopes, offered a profound insight into the realities of medieval Japan. They weren't just abstract historical facts, but the lived experiences of individuals grappling with the challenges of their time. Their dreams, while simple, reflected the fundamental human desire for survival, for peace, and for the well-being of their loved ones. The whispers faded, but their echoes lingered, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity, and a reminder of the fragility of life, a truth that transcends time and circumstance. The gentle rhythm of their breathing, a soft susurrus against the quiet of the night, pulls you back under. A warmth spreads through your limbs, a comforting weight settling over you. The edges of consciousness blur, the sounds of the world outside fading into a soft, indistinct hum. You're adrift, floating on a sea of tranquility, carried away on the tide of sleep. It's curious, this habit of a single, consolidated block of sleep. For centuries, humans embraced a different pattern, biphasic sleep. Two distinct periods of rest, bookending a period of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night. Imagine it. The fire banked low, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Families gathered, talking softly, mending clothes, sharing stories, perhaps even making love. A time for contemplation, for connection, for activities impossible in the harsh light of day or the deep slumber of night. This period of wakefulness provided more opportunities for communal activity, strengthening social bonds and fostering a sense of shared experience. History whispers of these quieter moments, of a world less driven by the relentless march of the clock. There's a strange thought that drifts through your mind, a fragment of something read long ago. Samurai warriors and their fascination with dreams. They believed dreams held messages, glimpses into the future, warnings of impending danger, or insights into one's own character. They'd consult dream interpreters, seeking meaning in the swirling landscapes of their subconscious minds. Did they dream of battles won and lost, of honor and duty, or perhaps of quiet moments of peace, a respite from the constant threat of violence? The debate continues to this day in academic circles. Was biphasic sleep a healthier way to rest? A natural rhythm dictated by the human body's internal clock, undisturbed by the artificial glow of electric lights? Or was it simply a consequence of limited lighting options? A pragmatic adaptation to a world cloaked in darkness for half the day? Did our ancestors enjoy deeper, more restorative sleep, broken into two segments? Or did the constant cycle of sleep, wakefulness, and sleep again disrupt their circadian rhythms, leaving them perpetually slightly fatigued? There are arguments on both sides, historical records open to interpretation, physiological studies yielding conflicting results. The mystery of biphasic sleep lingers, a puzzle piece in the larger mosaic of human history. You drift deeper, the whispers of history fading, replaced by the vibrant tapestry of a dream. Here, time flows differently. There are no deadlines, no urgent demands, no relentless ticking of the clock. The world moves at a slower pace, dictated by the rising and setting of the sun. You wake in the dream, not to the jarring blare of an alarm, but to the soft glow of dawn filtering through leaves. The air is cool and crisp, carrying the scent of dew-kissed grass and blooming flowers. There's a sense of peace, a deep, abiding calm that settles over you like a warm blanket. The day unfolds slowly, organically. You work with the rhythms of nature, planting seeds, tending to crops, gathering fruits and vegetables when they are ripe and ready. There's a deep satisfaction in this connection to the earth, in the simple act of nurturing and harvesting. The midday sun brings warmth and a sense of languid contentment. You rest in the shade of a large tree, listening to the gentle rustle of leaves and the chirping of birds. Time seems to stretch out, endless and unhurried. There's no pressure to be anywhere, no need to rush. Just the simple pleasure of being present in the moment. As the sun begins to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, you gather with others around a crackling fire. Stories are shared, songs are sung, laughter echoes through the twilight air. There's a deep sense of community, of belonging, of shared experience. The firelight flickers on faces, illuminating smiles and creating a sense of warmth and intimacy. The darkness of night descends, bringing with it a sense of tranquility and peace. You sleep soundly, lulled by the sounds of nature, the chirping of crickets, the hooting of owls, the gentle whisper of the wind through the trees. There are no worries, no anxieties, no fears to disturb your slumber, just the deep, restorative sleep of someone who has lived in harmony with the natural world. In this dream world, life is simple, yet profoundly fulfilling. There's a sense of purpose in the everyday tasks, a connection to something larger than oneself. The relentless pursuit of productivity and achievement is replaced by a deep appreciation for the present moment, for the beauty and simplicity of life, lived in accordance with the natural rhythms of the earth. You wake within the dream again, the sun a warm caress on your skin. The cycle begins anew, another day unfolding in its unhurried rhythm. The absence of deadlines, the freedom from the tyranny of the clock, creates a sense of liberation, a deep exhale of the soul. Life is not a race to be won, but a journey to be savored, each moment a precious gift. You breathe deeply, inhaling the sweet scent of wildflowers, feeling the warmth of the sun on your face, and for a fleeting moment you believe, truly believe, that this is how life should be. A life lived in harmony with the rising and setting sun, a life free from the artificial constraints of time. The first light of dawn kissed my eyelids, coaxing me awake. The straw mat beneath me rustled as I shifted, the sounds of the family already stirring around me filling the small house. The air held the scent of wood smoke, and something subtly sweet, perhaps simmering rice. Outside, a rooster crowed, its call echoing across the still sleeping village. Life here revolved around the sun, around the seasons, around the relentless but necessary rhythm of agricultural labor. Each day, from sunrise to sunset, the villagers would toil in the fields, cultivating the land that sustained them. It was a life far removed from the complexities of my own time, a life intrinsically linked to the earth and its bounty. I imagined them out in the fields now, their movements honed by generations of practice, their hands calloused but skilled. It was a life of hard work, undoubtedly, but there was a certain dignity in it, a connection to something ancient and fundamental. I thought about the stories I'd read, about how even the samurai, warriors known for their discipline and martial prowess, retained a connection to the land. Some, I recalled, even carried miniature, meticulously crafted landscapes in their pockets. Tiny, portable gardens that served as a reminder of the natural world amidst the chaos of battle. It seemed a strange juxtaposition. The brutal reality of war contrasted with the serene beauty of nature, but perhaps it spoke to a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. Later, as I broke my fast with the family, I couldn't help but wonder about the women's roles in this agricultural society. I'd read conflicting accounts, some suggesting that women were primarily relegated to domestic tasks, while others portrayed them as active participants in field labor. It was a scholarly debate that continued to this day, a testament to the complexities of reconstructing the past and understanding the lives of those who lived it. The women here, however, seemed to move seamlessly between indoor and outdoor tasks, their contributions clearly vital to the smooth functioning of the household and, perhaps, the village economy as well. The time came to say goodbye. I bowed low, expressing my gratitude for their generosity and kindness. They smiled, accepting my thanks with a quiet grace that seemed ingrained in their very being. There were no effusive displays of emotion, no grand pronouncements, just a simple acknowledgement of the connection we had shared, however brief. The bell maker, his hands rough but steady, placed a hand on my shoulder. "May your journey be peaceful," he said, his voice deep and resonant like the bells he crafted. As I stepped out of the garden and onto the dusty path, a single cherry blossom petal detached itself from a nearby branch and landed softly on my shoulder. It felt like a final farewell, a gentle reminder of the beauty and tranquility I had found in this small village. The image of the bellmaker, his face etched with the wisdom of years, the challenger's graceful movements in the training yard, the quiet peace of the garden, these memories lingered, whispers of steel and petals fading into the recesses of my mind. And now, as the light dims in your own world, as the sounds of your day begin to quiet, let the rhythm of that ancient village carry you toward sleep. Remember the bellmaker's wisdom, honed by years of quiet contemplation and dedicated craftsmanship. Recall the challenger's grace, the effortless power in every movement, a testament to the discipline and dedication required to master one's craft. Bring to mind the garden's peace, the serenity that emanated from every carefully placed stone, every meticulously tended plant. Let these images settle into your dreams, connecting you to the timeless currents that flow through our shared human story. The stories of hard work and quiet contemplation, of challenges met and overcome, of finding peace amidst the demands of daily life. These are the threads that bind us together, across time and across cultures. Sleep well, friend. The night is a time for rest, for dreams, for renewal. Allow your mind to wander, to explore the landscapes of your own inner world. Let go of the worries and anxieties of the day, and surrender to the restorative power of sleep. And when you wake, may your own world feel a little more integrated, a little more connected to the rhythms that sustain us all. May you find a renewed appreciation for the simple things, for the beauty that surrounds you, for the connections that enrich your life. May you carry with you the peace of the village, the wisdom of the bellmaker, the grace of the challenger, and the tranquility of the garden, allowing these memories to inform and inspire you on your own journey.